this is incredible. Like, humans are incredible.
Yeah.
You know, and once you get that feeling, and you start looking at magazines or books or pictures, and you're just like, there's shit like this all over the place, dude. And then that's when you get like, I got to see all this stuff.
Yeah.
So we did that. We ended up doing Costa Rica. Carrie went on like an 8-week trip to South America a few years later, and I flew down and went to Peru and Bolivia for a couple weeks. And then after that trip, she had been there for 8 weeks, but I was only there for 2 weeks. And I was like, fuck, man, it must have been so cool to be there all that time. And like, you got to travel to all these different countries and like go on these crazy bus rides and have these adventures with your friends. And, you know, we were really talking about it, getting really excited. And one day we were driving home from like Easter weekend with her family. And we were driving back from Cambria. We were driving back to LA. And we were like, you want to know what, man? We should just like quit our jobs and like travel. Like, maybe we can, like, make a thing out of it. Like, you know, around the world in, like, 80 weeks or something like that. We'll take a year and a half off, and we'll go and we'll do this. And we had all these ideas and talked about it, and then, you know, we had this. The seed was kind of planted.
Yeah.
You know, so, like, the next time we were sitting around, we're like, hey, you remember that? You know, that was in, like, 2010, right? Or maybe that was 2008 or something. And, you know, a couple weeks or a month passed, and then we were still talking about it. And then we're like, how do we do this? Like, how is this something that we're going to end up doing?
Yeah.
And, you know, you start, you know, she's like a super planner, and like when she gets into things, she's got out like the legal pad, and she's like, okay, week 1 is this place, week 2 is this place, week 2 is this place, okay, average budget, like what if we staying in hostels, it's going to cost this, it's going to cost this, it's going to, you know, these are the things, this is the type of currency, you know. And then eventually she's got this plan, and we're like, wow, that's crazy, but like, that's awesome, but can we really do that? Like, we're professionals, we have jobs, you know, like we have careers and stuff, and so we're kind of like, well, and then we kind of back off of the idea again, you know, because you're like,
get a little scared.
Yeah, you're just like, is this really feasible? Is this even really a good idea? And then there was something else, you know, like the more you sort of climb the ladder in your job, right? The more the phone rings, the more responsibility you have, and like, sure, your bank account is like stacking up a little bit more, and you can get some nicer things. But then you're like, what am I doing? What am I doing with all this stuff? Like, I'm not I don't want to be out with my friends. You know, we both worked in television, which is like the panic industry. Like, if something's wrong, it's like, like the fucking you know, the air raid siren goes off. Everybody's getting called on their cell phone, and then you're like, they tell you what the problem is. You're like, okay, well, here's this super easy solution. Thanks for like calling and riling me up at 9:30 p.m. You know, like, sorry that, you know, so-and-so didn't get their script, or they're not seeing this. The executive producer doesn't know how to open a link in his email. You know, like, it seems pretty basic. I don't know what more I can do for him.
Right click.
I'll deal with it tomorrow. Oh, he called back. He said it's fine. And you're like, well, you just like called the entire everybody on the contact sheet to like. Yeah. And we were kind of looking at that, and we were like, man, the more we advance, the more tethered you get.
Yep.
Right? Like, I always look at it like, people think that the leash is shortest at the bottom, but it's not, right?
Yeah. So like
the head of the dog, that's where the leash gets tighter. And the closer you get to that, the more pull they have on that. And we were like, man, we don't necessarily want to do that.
Yeah.
And LA is a great place to live, but we were kind of, it was hard to see light at the end of the tunnel of this crazy fun lifestyle we had. And we're like, well, what if we want to have a family? Like, and I have this, you know, 40-minute commute, and our rent is, you know, $2,500 a month. Like, can really only one of us work so the other person could stay home? And we're like, is there a future for us here? And eventually it got sped up to where we were like, all right, how do we really do this? Like, what can we start cutting so we start stacking money?
Yeah. So,
bye-bye HBO, bye-bye, you know, premium. Like, see, we'll take the least amount of insurance we need on the car.
Yeah.
We'll lower, you know, we'll raise all our deductibles. We'll do all these like adult things to just try to like, okay, we're not giving up, but we're setting ourselves up in case this does happen.
Yeah.
And then two major things. One is Carrie worked on a show called The X Factor in its first season in the U.S. And there was just so much money in the show, and they had brought all these producers over from the UK, and they just have a different work-life balance there. Like, apparently in the UK they don't have any rules about how long people can work.
So it's insane.
You know, so they were working, you know, Carrie one time worked for like 3 days straight, like had to go to the, like, you know, a medic and get like a IV drip.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because she was just like dehydrated, exhausted, all these things. And she was just like, you know, she remembers like sitting in a meeting, like after busting her ass, and then having someone like bring something up or sort of ream her or whatever, and then immediately ask her to do something more. And she was like, okay, right on top of that, and like walked out and like applied for the Australian work travel visa. You know what I mean? And, like, that's when she knew. And a few months before that, while she was working on that show, this is a much darker scenario. One of our close friends in our group of friends in LA was just murdered, like execution style, in front of his house by some people who were just on like a straight bender.
Yeah,
just like
zombies,
nice. Yeah, in like a nice, like West LA neighborhood that he had lived in for years on a quiet street. These dudes just came up and just blasted in the back of the head.
Jesus.
And Carrie was like gone for that, had to like come home from work and you know, travel back to LA and like be around all friends and like in that moment and going through all that, you realize like, dude, this is like the least likely scenario. Like, they can pull the plug at any time on you.
Yeah.
You know, science doesn't give a shit. Like, it's in the universe, you know, like, you're such a small piece of it. And we were like, dude, let's do it. Let's do this. We've been saving money. We're prepared to do this. Let's go. And that was, I think, in, like, April or something. Yeah, it was in April, because it was right around Mother's Day when that happened. And in November, we were gone, man.
Shit.
Took off, yeah. And we moved all our shit, like gave up our apartment. I sublet a friend's place because he was. That was 2011 when that happened, and she was working on X Factor, and then that's when we decided we were going to go.
Yeah.
And then so it was another year. So when the year came up, we gave up our lease. A buddy of mine was like, "I'm gonna be out of town for 6 months." And I'm like, I'm going to move into your apartment, whatever. And he's like, cool, you don't have to pay me. And I'm like, pay you a little bit of money, whatever. Carrie was traveling for another gig. So I just put all of our stuff in storage. And I'm just like living out of a backpack already, but like in my friend's house.
Yeah.
And then when Carrie moved back, she took another job. Because the other thing, too, is we kept putting this off. We were like, we're going to go in 2010. We're going to go in 2011. But you're always like, do we have enough money?
Yeah.
Are we ready to do this? Are we ready to say, bye, friends, family, everybody, and just like be off the grid, you know? And that was really before smartphones were like everyone had one, right? And before the internet was at your fingertips all the time. So we put all our stuff in storage. We were living at friends' places. We like moved in to another. Like as soon as my friend came back, Carrie was like, "Hey, my other friend is." She has to go to New York. She needs someone to sublet her apartment. So we ended up moving into like this bougie, like super nice, high-rise condo complex, like the sort of place that we wouldn't normally live.
Yeah.
You know, but we're like staying in this blank room, you know, this completely empty room with like our wire, like Build-A-Cubes as our dresser, and like we're sleeping on like an air mattress.
Yeah.
You know, we did that for 6 months. And then it's amazing like how much money you can save. And at that point we were like, we have the visas, we are ready to do this, like, let's go. Like, we've done all this step, no more balking, let's go. And so we finished out 2012, basically, and kind of ran our jobs. Like, Carrie finished a project. I literally got called into the office about a week before I had planned to put in my 2-week notice, and they were like, hey, we want to promote you, we want to bring you on, we want to give you more responsibility. And I was like, well, actually I'm not going to do that. We're going to try something else. Like, we're going to peace out and try traveling. So I mean, that's kind of a long way to get to it, but we were really motivated about it for a long time. And then you have these plans, and just like everything in life, right? That's a very like American suburban thing. You're like, we have this great idea, let's do it, and you're excited about it. and then you're like, can we do this?
Yeah.
And then you start looking at the logistics, and you're like, okay, so maybe that super fun idea is like, it's going to take some work.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're like, do we have enough money? And you can keep giving yourself all these reasons.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Not to.
The excuse train can go on forever, right?
Oh, yeah. And it's leaving the station all the time. There's a train every 15 minutes, man. Like, there's a million of them.
Yeah.
And if you want to find them, you can.
Yeah.
And, it just sucks. Like and that was the thing that we got out of it was like, dude, what if we just kept doing that? Like, we're so grateful now to have had those experiences, and people are always like, we wrote a blog post about this, and people are like, well, it must be nice to be able to do that.
Yeah, the first one I read, and that's kind of how I got introduced to your site, was that one.
And Carrie, I'm more like this Buddhist about it. I'm like, yes, it is very lucky that we were able to like come to this. But she's like, no, man, we worked our asses off and we sacrificed, and then we chose to do this. There's no luck involved.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, I get most people are generally saying that as either like some sort of, as just a figure of speech.
Yeah.
Must be nice, or you're very lucky, right?
Nice,
because lack of a, they're not bothering to come up with a better term, or considering that you did work your ass off, or it's like this sort of backhanded dig, like, oh, you must be a trust fund kid or something, just traveling the world.
Well, how much of that is also just perceived?
Yeah.
And
how much of it is it's perceived,
completely
right?
Jealous too, because like, if I only had my shit together, I'd totally do that too. If I could take the time to figure it out, to to read the playbook.
Right, to read the playbook, or just, because it's work.
Yeah.
It's hard work, and it's sacrifice. It was really hard for me to be like, all right, we're getting rid of HBO, so now I have to go to someone's house and watch Game of Thrones every Sunday, which is, because you're built up on all these nice, fat, dumb, and happy luxuries.
Absolutely.
Right? And your creature comforts that you love so much. But, I've also found that, like, you cut stuff like that off, and now you're like, okay, so Sunday night, now I have an appointment to go over to my friend's house.
And your life is richer because of it.
And your life is richer because of it.
Yeah. I get that.
It's easy to get, but it's harder to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, we're starting to go through a bunch of that now. Is cost cutting and figuring out what we're going to do, and that's some of the stuff. When we're on the phone with the Dish Network, well, what channels are important to you? It's like, honestly, it's the kids now. Nickelodeon is important to me. Sports, I could care less.
Right. I just don't have 4 hours to sit down and like.
Yeah. I used to watch Sunday football all day Sunday, and that's like 6-pack of beer, and I'd sleep by 3.
Right.
And that was great, but those aren't my Sundays anymore.
Right.
And it's not important for me to have NFL Network, ESPN 37, or whatever it is.
Right.
And it's way more important for me to have that extra $50 a month.
Sure. But also just have that time and not even have the temptation to do that kind of stuff.
Or if we're going to go out and watch a game or do something, it is a social event.
Right.
At that point now. I love it. How far into the traveling were you before you decided to start blogging? And
the end?
The end? When you're done?
Well, when we first... so when we start, I actually had a meeting with a friend of mine, like, before we left, like, long before we left, just kind of asking him, like, he hadn't done anything like this, but he was just a guy kind of had his finger on the pulse. He was, like, an actor and model, and he had, like, these lifestyle brands, and somebody I'd worked with on a soap opera called Passions. And he told me, he was like, what you should do is create this persona, like, create a thing, create a blog, start writing now. Open your Twitter account, build this thing, talk about your plan, tell everyone.
Yeah.
And you can build this base, and then this is in like 2008. He's telling me this, right? And I'm like, man, that sounds like a lot of work, dude. Like, the whole point of going on this travel thing is to not do any of that. And also, like, once you start getting into blogging and all this sort of online media stuff, you find out how much you have to sell yourself. Yeah. And how much you're now, like, curating your persona and what you're putting out there, and, like, how does this look for me? Is this using our voice and all that kind of stuff? And so I just sort of, like, put that conversation away. because the idea was when our first move when we left in 2012, we flew to Australia. We both had